Hi, welcome back. This is Catherine D. Henry from Palpable Media. And I'm going to start a program today that's going to be about getting back to business. What it occurred to me that we have a lot of conversations about XR and all these great new technologies, but very few talking about what these technologies mean and why you should care. How can these transform your business to help you survive in these difficult times? And more importantly, how can you use these technologies to future-proof your career? So I created a presentation that I'd like to share with you that outlines how these technologies can be used today and how they are being used, so you have an understanding of what this conversation is about, and also start thinking about the kinds of skills that are required to thrive in this new economy. So I'm going to switch over to that in just a minute. I know it's really difficult dealing with a lot of these technologies, new technologies, as we're all at home. And I hate to say it, I'm no exception. So getting back to business in XR, I wanted to talk about the opportunities in the new reality, this new contact-free society. But first, let's talk about the disruption. We've been facing enormous challenges on human resources. On the one hand, we're looking at business owners who are looking to save their businesses and to remain profitable, or at very least survive in difficult times. And on the other hand, workers whose protections and safety and benefits have been taken away pretty much steadily since the last recession, when we've got so many people who are now contract workers who realize that they really would prefer to have more benefits and protections. And so there's a huge conflict coming out of that. For other workers, the issue is communication and collaboration. How do you continue a conversation with people when you can't see them? How do you get that project done? How do you move things forward when you have very limited tools that are effectively two-dimensional and don't allow you to communicate face-to-face, or even work with joint prototypes and see each other and be able to negotiate with your suppliers or your partners? Everyone's struggling right now, so that face-to-face contact really makes a difference. And Zoom doesn't work. There are a zillion Zoom conference calls, and it's simply not working. Maintenance and repair, whether it's a factory, a plant, equipment and machinery, a lot of it's so expensive, these huge capital-intensive investments that people have been making, and they're not able to oversee them. Similarly, homes, whether it's cable TV and Wi-Fi, or it is plumbing and infrastructure, none of these things can be monitored and controlled right now. And finally, business operations, from the upstream activities, from manufacturing, production, and packaging, to downstream activities relating to retail and point of sale. All of those things have come effectively to a standstill, and people are grasping for solutions. Oops, I didn't realize I didn't have the big screen on. Here we go. So we talked about the challenge, but really the main challenge is, what do we do when humanity itself is the problem? What we're looking at is a contact-free economy. I've turned that coin. Please quote me when you use it. So the contact-free economy basically means we're going to need virtualization tools to bridge the gap between people and business functions across every area of our lives. And so we need a virtualization tools and a virtualization strategy. Now, after September 11th, an interesting fact is that people realized that with the destruction of the Twin Towers, they destroyed enormous businesses and lost a lot of value, not only in human life, which was tremendous. And as a New Yorker, I can speak personally that it was a very, very devastating event emotionally. But equally, as a business impact, it was devastating, because people realized they had so much record, so much knowledge that was lost with the loss of those buildings. And so cloud computing was created, and software as a service was born. But nobody ever imagined an instance in which we had an era of social distancing, and what would that look like? Now, virtual reality is not new. It's been around since the 1970s, 1980s, and even more crude forms for centuries. But we do have a combination of tools now with 5G and AI that can enable a lot of these tools to thrive under the current environment. And there's a whole spectrum of them. But just to give you an example, it's AI, it's robotics, it's chatbots. We're going to talk about all of those We're also going to talk about interactive and immersive entertainment, and specifically XR for marketing, and all the ways these can be combined to help save your business, and ways in which you might want to position yourself for within your company, or even think about new skill sets for a new career. So what are those resources? We're looking at basically three things: tech, media, and platforms. So as at the dawn of YouTube, we have a lot of new platforms that we are going to be exploring. And it's really exciting because that effectively means that we have people who are going to be the experts in these spaces. And so we want to make sure that whatever you can do in XR, you can actually do in real life. So for example, trying to keep the screen up. Sorry about that. So with these new platforms, imagine, who knew with the iPhone that you couldn't just make calls or surf the internet or ask for directions, but actually you can ask a perfect stranger to come up with their car, pick you up. They'd also pick up another perfect stranger on the way and then drop you off at your destination. Now, nobody anticipated that when it was first created. In fact, I remember somebody walking down the street with a phone saying, "Hey, did you hear Uber is now going to deliver food?" Well, a whole ecosystem was born. And that's the same thing as these new platforms. So, for example, last week we had Justin Bolognino of Metaverse with us. Sorry, Justin Bolognino of Meta, META. Metaverse is going to join us in a few weeks. But Justin Bolognino of Meta was talking about the Unreality platform that he's devised for creative technologists. Another platform is going to be the new Netflix, where we're going to have 3D content, and that's called Steam, traditionally used for gaming, but it's going to become a household word, and something that people will be using quite frequently as a platform for 3D content. So all these platforms are very new. It's also important to think that this media, you need to understand the media that goes into it. So if it's VR, or if it's AR, or if it's combination, or if these are hybrid applications that can be accessed across different technologies. And finally, we're going to need new rules of engagement. So how are you going to market on these? Oops. I'm just going to blow this up because it's so much easier to do it this way. So first, let's talk about the size of the XR market. The exponential growth, we've been looking at $209 billion, and a lot of people think, well, this is a small space. Now, we talked about gaming. Everybody knows about gaming. But in the business context, I can't even tell you how many times I'll tell people, well, I work in XR, VR, AR, and they'll say, well, that's just gaming, or that's just location-based entertainment. There is an arcade near me. Is that what you do? And kind of, also. But it's a $20 billion industry. And when I tell people that, they're astonished because it has a very rich ecosystem and it's getting bigger. In fact, the compound annualized growth rate is 77%. And we're now seeing a lot of activity in the space. For example, Apple, in the past 2 weeks alone, has made two significant acquisitions. One, an AR company, and the other one, Next VR. So they're placing their stakes in the XR game for mobile, and I understand they're also working on a headset, a hybrid headset. So it's going to be really, really interesting. But Facebook did this years ago. They put their stake in the ground, and after a lot of iterations, they came up with the Quest, which is they can't produce them fast enough. So we're seeing some very exciting developments, and it's moving very quickly. And I expect it's going to continue at pace, if not much more quickly. So I expect the 77 is going to go well over 100 within short order. But first, let's talk about some use cases. So how are people using this? Interestingly, healthcare and medical applications have been going back for 40 years. People have been using VR for physical rehabilitation since the 1980s. And it's fascinating because it has such a deep, VR connects with the mind in such a deep way that it's very difficult to distinguish ones where the physical world ends and reality begins. And so that's why it has been used so widely in the context of medical devices. Retention rates are also incredibly high. We have a number of cases that prove that retention rates post-training in VR are significantly higher than traditional methods. One study I like in particular shows that the retention rates for children 1 year after the initial examination and the initial information was given, for traditional students, they learned they retained 20% of the information they learned, whereas in VR they retained a full 80%. That's why it's also a very powerful tool for education. So we can imagine, especially with, unfortunately, in an era of distance learning where students are no longer able to attend classes in real life, that this is going to be a very effective tool. And in many cases, it may be more effective than other ways. But it also means that there's a huge gap because everything that's being taught online is not available in 3D. Furthermore, we need to create 3D assets so that people can experience science from a 3D perspective. It's a whole new different thing. And hopefully I'll get a chance to show you some of those demos, but it's fascinating. We're also using some of the VR in the front lines right now to quickly train and upskill the medical staff to treat coronavirus around the world. So the use cases are many, and that's one of the reasons why you're hearing about VR more than augmented reality or any other technologies that I'll be discussing today. It's because it's really of critical use in an era of social distancing. And thanks to 5G and stronger computing powers, we're going to see this really take off in the short run. So healthcare, education, manufacturing, and automotive, I'd say that they've been using headsets, including augmented reality. In fact, many of my colleagues have been talking about augmented reality. We really take off much more quickly than VR. Well, things have turned around, but I still feel that AR has got a huge role to play going forward, especially mobile AR. In fact, Wayfair recently announced its earnings were very strong because instead of taking a brick and mortar strategy, they invested heavily in augmented reality. It makes sense. Wayfair is a furniture company. So having augmented reality to measure the space in a room is very helpful. But it was a risky game that they played, and they came out on top. Other strong players who've been using augmented reality have seen, at least if not their main revenue stream, they've seen an ancillary use to augment their revenue stream. And I think that we can look to use VR and culturally for cultural institutions whose doors are shuttered, as well as across a number of different industries. Again, I've mapped all of this out on my big white paper and study I will be sharing with you for free over the next week or so, but I wanted to give you an instance of where we're using these first. And as we discussed before, new platforms require new content. I mean, listen, we're not going to be able to access in the same way. In the same way that when websites were first built, we basically took a stack of paper like, here are our press releases, and here are our annual reports. Let's put them online. And everything was kind of flat. And then, of course, rich media and videos took off. But banner ads don't make any sense in a 3D environment. If you're sitting in a room and suddenly a flat piece of paper comes across you, it's going to seem out of sync. Now, I studied virtual reality a full 10 years after finishing my MBA in marketing. And so it was a really new experience for me. Nevertheless, one of the first things I did in my program was to develop a perfume advertisement in VR, and it was a really exciting project because, again, it takes this new medium and uses it in a very, very unexpected way. And I believe that the new platforms, as I said, we're going to be looking at places where you can download and license the content, and we're also looking at ways of finding the talent to create the content. So this new platform like Unreality or like Steam Engine, those are going to be where we're going to go and get a lot of our information going forward. So that's exciting. And marketing is going to be a challenge too, because again, if you understand the technology, then you understand the power. Pokemon was one of the first instances where we saw mass craze because somebody created a game with AR. Now, once I was pitching a game to a retailer who said, yeah, I really like the idea, but what I thought, and I said, listen, I found out that your brand has a mascot, and they have a relationship with a Japanese company, and all Japanese companies have some sort of creatures. I've been to many offices in Japan. Even the most serious banks have cute cartoonish or mascots in their offices. And because they had this relationship, they had the licensing. And I said, why don't we use that? And the woman said, I just thought we would just put a big logo out. well, that's not really very much fun. We really have to think more creatively about how to gamify that experience. And so, using some examples from the gaming that have been very successful and importing them will be very helpful. I also believe that we're in a post-maximalist world, and that's the point here on my screen. Now, post-maximalism basically means people are over the excess and the materialism that they've seen online. The infighting of, say, the Real Housewives shows, or the brutality of language in these confrontational programs. I think we're going to see a softer, gentler side of social media, at least in the near term. And I've seen a lot of pushback on Instagram, for example. The influencers, for example, are being told, hey, why are you posing outside? You shouldn't even be outside. And by the way, I don't want to buy your $1,500 outfit. A lot of people are, in dire circumstances right now. This isn't the time. A lot of accusations about being tone deaf. On the other hand, we're also seeing a lot of congratulations and uh, good words being said about those people who are trying their best to entertain from home. Jimmy Fallon here, who's an actor here in the United States, has famously been trying to film his very successful nightly program from home with using just his phone, which is being held by his wife, and he and his children are trying to keep everyone, or that's he's trying to entertain as well as children are trying to distract him. But anyway, it's been very well received because it's so natural, and it also kind of relives the frustration that we're all feeling as we try to make our way through the technology, myself included. So in this post-maximalist society, we're also going to see new norms, not only in terms of the content and the tone, but also the icons. Who's going to be your brand ambassador? Now, those of you who've seen the work that I did at the ANA on chatbots with Mimic, who were one of the premier avatar creators in the world, will know that this is a subject I feel very passionately about, and I wrote an article about it on LinkedIn, so feel free to rifle through some of those. But what's interesting about these is these are going to be your new brand ambassadors. And the ones that you see on my screen were actually debuted, it seems ages ago, January this year at the CES, which is a computer electronics show in Las Vegas. And it was a huge hit because you could see these people full screen in 3D. They can turn around. In virtual reality, that you are fully present, is their presence is there. And they are very realistic. They are humanoids. Actually, they call them neons. Another term is digital doubles. Whatever you call them, these are going to be new brand ambassadors. You have to think about, what is their persona like? What do they sound like? Now, of course, they can also speak multiple languages, and all of them fluently. And so we have to think about how we choose these people to represent us, what they look like, they sound like, and how across, how many platforms do we want to use them? Is it the one same person, or is it multiple people? So we need to think about that. And I fully expect that, given the pressures on so many companies to relay information now only with very limited forms, as I said, on their websites or on social media or on some sort of a Zoom chat, we will expect to see them as educators, investor relations staff, news staff, retail assistants. I mean, basically every function you can imagine, including home care or companions for the elderly. So there's no limit to the imagination, the kinds of functions that they can perform, and you can license them. So it's very interesting. There are also a lot of companies that are able to make realistic avatars of yourself. And make no mistake, in the same way that you probably have a Gmail account, you will most likely have an avatar. And if it's not Gmail, it's Facebook or something, but you will be required to have an avatar to enter into many of these spaces, and people will need to recognize you within the company. At first, I believe that they're going to be fairly conservative, and they will match some of the very hyper photorealistic environments that we see in many 3D spaces. But over time, do not be surprised if the arts team or the creatives start turning up as centaurs or gladiators or unicorns, because I think ultimately that's probably where it's headed. So, getting back to the contact-free economy, the three basic areas where I think that we can see some immediate efficiency gains are going to be manufacturing, production, and transport. We've already seen many advertisements about pickup and smart portals, as well as where it's contactless. And I expect to see a continued use of driverless vehicles and transportation vehicles, especially since now that the streets are empty. I mean, that's obviously the next wave. Now, maintenance and repair, we're going to see a lot of a drive towards helping to troubleshoot things through automation and through online content. Again, I referred to chatbots, I referred to augmented reality. We're also going to be looking at smart sensors and smart homes, the Internet of Things. This is when it's really going to start flourishing. And finally, the tough part is probably in real life interactions. And I know that there's been a big pushback by a company that refused to return concert fees to its patrons. Well, that's going to be DOA, and it's really bad news because there are going to be a number of new platforms, again, meeting spaces. We are going to be talking to HTC later this week, and I think that they've got a big announcement coming. But imagine a Madison Square Garden or a football stadium that's now virtual, and you can attend at a fraction of the price. Well, guess what? You're going to have full attendance. And for those cultural institutions and public spaces that are closed, they also have a new revenue stream. So when the doors do open up back again, hopefully that will help even things out. And even online, you can exit through the gift shop. So there's an opportunity there to make some profit and to make some gains, even in these difficult times. To give a sense of the incremental savings costs per employee by combining all these different technologies are significant. Now, I chose this particular graph by David Aboud at Accenture on purpose. The reason is that I feel that it's important to think about the fact that we need multiple technologies to work together. And therefore, in creating a virtualization strategy, you need to really think about the totality of your business and then the weak points across the entire value chain and how those same technologies can work elsewhere. Because if you've made that significant capital investment, you want to make sure you're maximizing it. And so it's really important to understand what those technologies can offer. I also wanted to point out its cost per employee because of the pressures on companies to automate and to use machines as often as possible because they don't get sick, they don't take off, they don't need paid leave, they don't need vacations, they don't need a salary. They just need to be maintained because they can run 24 hours a day. So be aware that there are going to be significant pressures to create economies of scale and push up productivity in the near term. So if you are looking for a job, that means there are a lot of opportunities. Don't get depressed. The good news is that there are a lot of these spaces. There just is not enough talent in the short term. And now that you're at home, maybe you can pick up some new skills. So if you're not an engineer or a robotics expert, know that you can learn artificial intelligence. Go to the Google website. They have a host of really fascinating courses and things that you can read about and even tests that you can try to create your own apps. It's so much fun. Natural language processing is going to be fundamental, as well as machine learning and adaptive learning. So all of these skills are going to come into play in teaching and upskilling the workforce of tomorrow. The real rock stars, in my opinion, are going to be the 3D artists and creative technologists of tomorrow. It's no secret that I had the New York City Tech Creatives. It's a collaborative of over nearly 3,000 people right now who are in New York. We created a Slack program for them so that they can also share. So if you're looking for creative technologists, please let me know, and I'll share the Slack address so you can tap into this rich resource. It's called the New York City Tech Creatives. But I really feel that going forward, we're going to see platforms like, as I said, Unreality, who will be able to harness all of that talent and show you what they can do. Again, in a 3D environment where all you have to do is click it and the thing just comes alive around you. It's going to be really exciting. And these technologists are going to know the creative potential of the technology, and they'll know the timing, the time frame, the costs, and help you troubleshoot all the issues before they come along. Because of course you might have the XR strategist, but then it's like having a creative director who can oversee the project from start to finish. XR strategists will be fundamental in terms of creating that architecture that we talked about and having the relationships to deploy the creative technologists and be able to identify the technologies and investments that you absolutely need from those that would be nice, but maybe better once we're on firmer ground. So they will be important. And so too will be the VR and AR trainers. They're not going to be the big virtualization futurists, but they will be people who can implement broad training programs like the one that we saw at Walmart, which is no small feat by any means of the imagination. It's very sophisticated, and expect that any business is going to be sophisticated, because if it's a complex business and it's successful, you've got to learn the secret sauce and how to transform that magic into technology. And then finally, whatever content that you are creating in YouTube or in your professional life, even if you're I don't know, if you're if you're a fitness trainer, you can do that in virtual reality, because these platforms are going to need content. Again, think back to the early days of YouTube and Instagram. They just really didn't have a lot of content, and so therefore you'll get a lot more eyeballs early days, and you'll also get a jump start into learning what works and what doesn't before other people catch on. The important thing is that you take control. We don't have years, we have months to get started. If you want to survive this pandemic and you want to position yourself for this uncertain world, we really need a virtualization strategy to get to work now and get back to business. So you need a comprehensive review of all of your activities and a skills gap analysis. Where did things fall apart, and what operations didn't work, and how can we bridge that? So whether it's communications and collaborations tools, or whether it's more serious like operations, then you need to adopt the right technology to address those issues. Then, of course, match the teams, get them together, make sure you have the right skill set. Maybe it's one of the top 10 talent pools that all of us XR technologists are talking about, or maybe it's a local person who's really an expert in that one thing who can help you develop just what you need. Whatever it is, start working with them very closely. Make sure that you let them into your organization and let them lead the way. And then cut, paste, and repeat, because I have a feeling that we're going to be using this, unfortunately, for some time to come. So in summary, urgent pressures to economize are really going to lead us to a more automated, machine-centric society. The good news is that there's plenty of room for developing skills and a need for new talent to create new jobs and new opportunities. So if you are thinking about what you should do and ways that you can grow your career, there are a number of new paths that you can take. These are just some, but even if you look at some of the help wanted ads at some of the emerging tech companies, you'll get a sense of what sort of skills that they need. And luckily today, many of those core skills can be acquired virtually free right now if you go onto the websites. So the second thing is that new resources exist today. So if you're looking to onboard specialists, we're all out there. We're happy to help. And we are able to identify the shortcomings of your business and provide value along the entire arc to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. So as you look to develop your virtualization strategy, I do encourage you not only to have a look at the white paper that I've developed and the roadmap that I've developed across industries, but also keep watching these programs. Every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, I'll be inviting guests from across the world, XR experts in their own right, and each one who has a lot of information to convey. So I know that's been really long. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you so much for working with me and your patience as I get through this. I really feel this is an exciting time despite everything that we're all going through. There is luckily there are solutions to all of these challenges. The main thing is to have courage. This too shall pass. Unfortunately, we don't know when that's going to happen, but the big picture is we have no choice but to move forward. So be courageous, have strength, be safe, and thank you so much for watching. Please share your feedback. I welcome it. And that's it for now. See you next time.